Whatever comes out of these gates, we've got a better chance of survival if we work together. Do you understand?
Remember Gladiator? That box office smash? The iconic story of a Roman general who is brutally betrayed, the husband to a murdered wife, father to a murdered son, who will have his vengeance in this world or the next? Well, now he can add footnote to a butchered legacy to his little speech, because some bastard has had the typical flash of genius and given us a sequel that no one wanted or asked for. The oh-so-imaginatively named Gladiator 2 has completely tarnished what was a brilliant movie. It's an absolute car crash, and the biggest loser in all of this is Russell Crowe, because the first Gladiator movie was his most iconic role, propelling him into Hollywood folklore and bagging him a Best Actor Oscar. It's almost as if Ridley Scott is deliberately trolling him.
We came to wreck everything and ruin your life.
Why Ridley Scott decided to make this pile of old dog shit is beyond me. It's clear he needs protecting from himself because he seems determined to destroy all of his old successes. He did it with Alien, basically bashing the ever-loving shit out of the franchise by giving us the disappointing Prometheus and the shower of shit that was Alien Covenant. And now he's completely ruined another one of his legacies.
Everything burns.
I knew I was in trouble the moment the film started, with the long, drawn-out, crappy animation recapping the story of the first movie. For a moment I thought I was watching Watership Down or something, but in hindsight I should have probably cherished this little cartoon because it was probably the best part of Gladiator 2. Everything rapidly went downhill from there. To be honest, I'm really struggling to understand why Ridley Scott has bothered with this movie. The first Gladiator film left zero questions to be answered. There was nothing else to be resolved or put to bed. The villain got his comeuppance, and the hero, well, he ended up very dead. There wasn't really any obvious way to follow on from the story, but that doesn't bother Ridley. He just gives us a rehash of the first film. Gladiator 2 is set 16 years after the events of the first film. We are introduced to Hanno, who along with his warrior wife are preparing to repel an attack from an invading Roman army. The only thing is, it turns out his name isn't Hanno at all. This guy is actually Lucius, all grown up. You remember, the annoying little brat from the first film. To summarise the rest of the story, I may as well channel my inner Commodus. Lucius becomes a slave. Lucius the slave becomes a gladiator. Lucius the gladiator defies 2 emperors. And it's not such a striking story, and certainly not an original one. Although the main plot of Gladiator 2 is identical to its predecessor, it commits a crazily impressive feat by being 100 times worse. For example, in the first film we get to watch Maximus rise through the ranks of gladiator school, killing his way to the Colosseum. With Lucius, he's identified as the ultimate gladiator purely from biting a very unconvincing CGI monkey, and then he beats up a podgy bald bloke who looks about as tough as Ross Kemp in Extras.
I'd like to see him come at me with all that I'm a hard bastard stuff. I'd say, put the baseball bat down. Send the minders home. It's just you and me. Skin on skin. Stripped to the waist.
Another thing I noticed, there was no camaraderie between Lucius and his fellow gladiators. In Gladiator 1 you see Maximus forge his relationships with Ralph Moeller's Hagen and Jimon Honsu's Juba. But we don't get any of that here. So when we get the scene where the gladiators follow Lucius into battle, it doesn't really work. Why do they even give a monkey's toss about him? Perhaps the worst thing about this film is the dreadful use of CGI. There are multiple animal fights in the Colosseum, and none of them look as convincing as the tiger fight from the first film. That's quite impressive given the first Gladiator film came out 24 years ago. Hollywood really needs to ditch the CGI because it's trash, pure and simple. The monkeys were terrible, the rhino rider was comical, but the crowning turd in the water pipe has to be the full-on naval battle in the Colosseum, complete with great white sharks munching on gladiators like potheads in a McDonald's. It has to be one of the most ridiculous things I've ever seen, and I was half expecting Captain Jack Sparrow to rock up at any moment. Yes, the first film was a little far-fetched and silly, but at least it had some sort of grounding in historical reality. I mean, sharks? Really? Given they've decided to put gladiators against Jaws in this movie, I was wondering what other creatures we could have as combatants in Gladiator 3, The Nightmare Continues. Maybe we could have a vampire gladiator. How about a demogorgon? Or maybe the time has come for Ridley to amalgamate two franchises he has now completely and successfully butchered. Maybe he could have Maximus and the boys square off against a xenomorph. Paul Mescal, who plays Lucius, is mostly harmless. He does what he can with a script that basically demands he channel his inner Maximus, but the only problem is he neither has the presence or charisma of Russell Crowe, so he's basically running through treacle. If you think Pedro Pascal is somehow going to rescue this movie, then think again. I really didn't get the point of his character. He's basically the same person that Russell Crowe plays in the first movie. He's a famous and successful general who is sent to the Colosseum when it is discovered that he is planning to overthrow the current rulers of Rome. I can only wonder why he signed up for this shit.
Show me the money!
I remember when this guy used to be a serious actor. Oh well, at least his character fared slightly better than his last venture into a gladiatorial event. Even Denzel Washington, so usually dependable, is an absolute car crash. He's basically resuming the role of Alonzo from Training Day. His character is very confusing. It's not really clear whether he's good, bad, or what his motivations are. He just seems to be floating around causing trouble. The end of Gladiator 2 is basically the same as the end of Training Day, where the hero tracks down Denzel Washington's villain and basically kicks the shit out of him in front of a watching crowd. We are also treated to some returning characters from the first movie. Connie Nielsen reprises her role of Lucilla, who's clearly not learned any lessons from the first film, as she does exactly the same thing as last time and gets completely fucked for it. We also get this guy back for some reason. I don't know if he begged to be in this movie or something. Perhaps they felt sorry for him, but didn't know what to do with his character, so they promptly just nailed him to a door. Cheers for coming back, mate. Another big problem with Gladiator 2 is we don't really know who the villain is. Is it Pedro Pascal's Honourable Acacius? Is it Denzel Washington's Alonzo Mark II? Or is it the two dopey emperors? None of them seem at all intimidating or particularly villainous. To be honest, the only good thing about the movie is the monkey, Dondas. He's absolutely hilarious, especially when it's declared that he's going to be the protector of Rome. That was the only moment that brought a smile to my otherwise grumpy face. I hope that monkey gets an Oscar for Best Supporting Actor, because he truly deserves it. The funny thing is, immediately after the success of the first Gladiator movie, Russell Crowe was so desperate for a sequel, he even hired broody ballad singer Nick Cave to write a sequel back in 2000. The basic plot of the Nick Cave script was that Maximus would wake up in the afterlife and he would be hired to kill an underworld god. However, he would be tricked and sent back to Roman times, where he battles with crocodiles in the Colosseum. Then he would time travel forward through the ages, fighting in wars like Vietnam. I remember hearing about this script idea back about 15 years ago, and I laughed my arse off. Thank fuck they didn't make that pile of shit, I said to myself. Well, after watching the absolute shash that was Gladiator 2, I'm actually sad that they made this version, because at least Nick Cave's script actually fulfilled what a sequel is supposed to do. It's supposed to continue the story, not just rehash the original,